So there's this new strategic paper making waves, and it's basically sounding a huge alarm bell. It's calling for a complete and total rethink of strategy for the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC. Okay, so let's get into this analysis and see why it argues that for these nations, self-sufficiency isn't just some far-off goal anymore, it's become an immediate, gotta-have-it-now kind of necessity. To really get why this is so urgent, the paper kicks things off with a pretty chilling question for you to think about. What if the very strategy you built for your own protection was actually your biggest weakness? I mean, that's the core problem this whole analysis digs into. Now, to really hammer this point home, the paper doesn't just look at history. Nope. Instead, it imagines a future crisis, a hypothetical war set in the year 2026. This whole scenario is designed to push the GCC's current strategies to their breaking point and, well, show where all the cracks are.
So, before this whole hypothetical crisis kicks off, you've got this really weird situation with the GCC states. On one hand, there's some of the richest countries on the planet, but on the other, they're also some of the most fragile. They'd used all that wealth to build this complex system of relying on others, and for a long, long time, everyone just assumed that meant they were safe.
And then, in this 2026 scenario, it all comes crashing down. Bam! Iranian strikes hit all 6 states, which just goes to show, having those foreign bases, it actually made them a target. Then the critical Strait of Hormuz slams shut, cutting off something like 90% of their food imports. And those security guarantees from the US, yeah, they don't stop the attacks. Suddenly, trying to stay neutral is just not an option. The whole old way of doing things just completely falls apart. So the paper is basically saying, look, this whole collapse, it wasn't just bad luck. It was pretty much guaranteed to happen because the system was built on what the paper calls 4 specific dependency traps. These were deep flaws in the system that were just never going to hold up under real pressure.
Okay, first up, you've got the alliance trap. For decades, the deal was pretty simple, right? You get our oil and a place to put your military bases, and in return, the US protects us. But what happens in the 2026 scenario? That very presence of US bases becomes the reason for the attacks. That shield turns into a bullseye.
Next up, the food dependency trap. Think about it. 80 to 90% of their food is imported, and almost all of it has to pass through one single tiny choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. So when that strait closes in the simulation, it's not some abstract risk on a PowerPoint slide anymore. It's an immediate threat of people going hungry. And then there's the imported weaponry trap, which, really just boils down to some pretty bad math. The GCC countries, they're some of the biggest arms buyers in the world. But the crisis shows that using million-dollar missiles to take down $1,000 drones, well, that's a battle you just can't win financially. It's totally unsustainable.
And last but not least, the oil dependency trap. And what's really interesting here is that even with all the talk and effort to diversify away from oil, the whole economic brand of the Gulf as a safe haven for business and tourism, it just proved to be super fragile. The moment airports and hotels got hit, even the non-oil parts of the economy just seized up.
Okay, so what does all this vulnerability actually cost? I mean, in real dollars and cents. This is where the paper stops talking theory and starts running the cold, hard numbers on what a single conflict like this would do to the economy.
And wow, the main number is just staggering. Based on UNDP data from this future scenario, the analysis figures the economic hit across the Arab region would be $186 billion. And get this, that's not over a year. That's in just one single month. And behind that huge number is a real human cost, right? We're talking a 6% hit to GDP, almost 4 million jobs just gone, and another 4 million people pushed into poverty. So the point the paper makes is huge. This isn't just about spreadsheets and numbers. It's about whether whole societies can stay stable.
And this right here, this is really the core of the whole economic argument. You're looking at the cost of 1 month of war versus the cost of investing in resilience for an entire decade. And they're almost the same. It's pretty clear, right? The paper's point is that it's way, way cheaper to prevent the fire than it is to rebuild everything from the ashes.
Okay, so if dependency is the trap, how do you get out of it? Well, the paper's really clear. The answer isn't to just wall yourself off from the world. The goal is to move towards something it calls interdependency. And this isn't just an idea, it's a model that has actually been proven to work.
Let's break down the difference here. Dependency, that's when you're leaning too heavily on one country, one supply route. It's fragile. But interdependency, that's totally different. That's coming from a place of strength. It's about having mutual relationships with lots of different partners, all while building up your own abilities at home. It means you always have options.
And look, this isn't just some academic theory. The paper points to a powerful, real-world example, Rwanda. After coming through a total catastrophe, the country made a conscious choice to build up its own internal strength while also making friends with a wide range of partners. And the result? An incredible return on investment. For every single dollar they spent on becoming more resilient, they saved $4 to $5 in losses when the next crisis hit.
So, the big question is, how does the GCC actually do this? Well, the paper lays out a really concrete framework to get to this kind of strategic autonomy. It moves past the analysis and gives an actual, actionable plan.
It all boils down to three main pillars. First, food and water. You've got to have your own supply, with enough reserves to last at least 12 to 18 months. Second, defense. Stop relying so much on others and start building your own drones, your own counter systems to deal with modern threats. And third, the economy. Really doubling down on diversification to make sure you're not so exposed to shocks.
And we're not talking about vague promises here. The paper gets super specific. It's talking about creating a real joint defense council with actual authority, setting aside that $200 to $300 billion over 10 years to fund everything, and setting clear targets like making 50% of your own military gear by 2035.
So after breaking down the problem, the jaw-dropping costs, and the way forward, the whole analysis really comes down to one final, powerful thought. It poses a question that reframes the entire debate. The ultimate question isn't whether the GCC can afford to make this investment.
It's whether, after seeing what failure could cost, they can possibly afford not to. A pretty sobering thought to end on, and a really stark and urgent warning.